This is Jesus, James, and Mark, and I am Mark.
And I'm James.
Welcome to episode 39.
39.
39?
Yeah.
You can get us on many platforms. There is Apple Podcasts, there's Spotify, there's Amazon Music, or is it Audible? There's also, iHeart, and you can find us on Facebook and YouTube. So however you found us, if that other way is better, go find it, like, subscribe, share the experience with somebody, and certainly we'd love to hear from you. So comment on the YouTube video. Well, no, I'm never going to respond to that. Maybe on Facebook, send us a message or send us an email, JesusJamesMark@gmail.com.
And remember, we're just two ordinary guys who like reading and talking about the Bible, trying to hope that we inspire people to do the same thing.
That's right.
And our mantra comes from 1 Corinthians 2. We know nothing but Christ and Him crucified.
Yes. And we used that in midweek. I like when we have midweek sort of discussions and then bring that back up.
Even though it almost split us up.
We had a church split in the which
we almost
really
had a denominational
We were
fissure.
discussing John 17, which is the book of John is a great book. They're good. It's like
Let's clarify, we did not almost split up.
We did not.
Yeah.
No, we didn't. We were just I was sharing with Chop, and it was a and look, let's throw it right in there.
Yeah.
First off, we are going to discuss Genesis. Let's not get away from all that. We are here to discuss Genesis, and we're going to talk some Noah today.
Yep.
And Noah means peace. I didn't know if you knew that. Did you know that?
I did not.
Noah means
I think I
peace.
did read that now that you mentioned
Or
it.
rest. Is it rest? Something like that? Rest?
Maybe.
Yeah, whatever. Listen, Hebrew words. I'm not an expert, but it's what I like to do in my free time. So we're going to discuss all of that, but I will say, I want to bring that in.
Okay, yeah.
To our discussion midweek was, I threw out a meme, and I guess in post-production I may be able to probably put the meme in here and share it. So I guess this is now. I'm telling my future me to put it in now. So this is the meme that said, I think John 17, was it 22
and 23
is just as good as John 3:16. Prove me wrong.
Yeah.
It's the old, because I'm a meme fan. I love memes and GIFs, technology for all that I hate it for. I'm a sucker for it.
You did use a picture of Steven Crowder, who I'm not a big fan of, but
it was the generic one that I found on the Google search. It was literally, I was making one really quick to send to you and Mark. And so the discussion was, and again, that I love that. But what we decided was to really brief. We don't have time to discuss that, but maybe if you push us, we'll do a bonus episode and talk about it. But ultimately,
go and read it.
It's really good.
Yeah, it is good.
But both, and again, what we also recommend is don't just read that scripture.
Yes.
At least read maybe the chapter or the pieces around it so you get a context of what's going on. But in John 3:16, of course, this is the famous, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son that we would not perish but have everlasting life, which is the salvation that is free to you, for you to accept.
Yep.
And it is probably the greatest verse.
Yes.
I will agree to that. But I said, now, if you become a believer, though, if you take that acceptance and then you go and read John 17, this is this great moment where where Jesus is going to ascend to heaven and he's doing all these things.
The time is near.
And he does this thing where he prays for the apostles as they're going to go out, and then he prays for us, the believers. And this is the part that I was sharing with you. I love this. This is where it talks about God giving Jesus glory, and then Jesus loving us so much, the believers of him, that he says, take these two, take the believers that you've given me, and let's share in that glory with them. Let's all be one in it.
And he references
so
it back to the time when they were together before the creation. He said, I want it to be that kind of unity.
Yes.
I want the body of Christ, the church, us,
yes,
to have the kind of union that we had at the beginning before the foundations of the earth were set, I think is the way he says it.
Both of our denominations, the Church of Chop and the Church of Panichelli, because again it was funny because we were play arguing with ourselves and then.
But that's a great concept. That is a wonderful concept.
But we do essentially what the essence of us play arguing, and since we have a friendship where we can do that and enjoy and have fun with it. But the problem is a lot of people can't or don't have that relationship, and this is how these splits happen. And it goes, just because you said that and because you're feeling this way, no, I can't live with it. I'm gonna do my own thing.
I'm taking these over 10 people, and we're going over here, and we're gonna believe this way.
And the flaw of that is, as I said, look, I understand because sometimes how I speak maybe reaches a person differently than how you would speak to a person. But we're all going to be in that same. It's all one.
Yes.
It's not the, all of the people here at, Shady Acres, Free Will Baptist, Southern Methodist, Calvinist, Reformist. I'm just throwing a bunch
Bear Hole Road Church of God or whatever.
Right. These are the people, but
maybe I should have put that.
Yeah, thank you for throwing out physical addresses there, buddy. Good job.
Okay.
That's great. So let's get back to the discussion. I wanted to, because we're going to bring this up, but so we have a couple of things we both want to hit on, and I love this because there's a couple things where I want to note this. We're going to discuss Noah, and there is this where God, we kind of talked about this last week. So if you missed last week's episode, it's there for you to listen. I can't catch up on everything, but we've had these angels, and then we've got these creatures that have been created, these sons of God. There's all this kind of and mankind is just wallowed in his own selfishness, and God has become sick of us.
We're about 2,000 years into creation, right? So we're right at there should be a mass population by this time, 2,000 years in, especially with the longevity of life. I'm sure people kept producing well into their years. So there's a lot of people.
And then there's all these other, and again, enjoy that because there's all these other things going on.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, once you dive into the Genesis 6 stuff, it's whoo. But at this point, and one of the things we hit on last week was the grief of just God saying that he felt sorry that he even created it.
Yeah.
And that he felt like I've got to destroy all this. But yet there was Noah.
Yeah.
And Noah was blameless amongst his people. Now, I did, because I was telling you this. A lot of people take blameless and they go, well, this guy was without sin. No. He just lived his life in a blame. Like, you couldn't point and say, because, and I think that's what you and I also, in the change of it, because I wanted to say this. He found something in the heart of Noah that made mankind worth saving.
Yes.
There was something still left in Noah that made God say, I'll destroy all of it except this, and I'll restart with this.
Yeah.
Because he still has this sense of righteousness or honor, and I think that's ultimately what was there. Noah wasn't perfect, but he strived to be better. And like I said,
verse 9 in chapter 6 says that Noah was a just man, perfect in his generation. Noah walked with God. And that does not mean he was sinless. It just means that meaning that he followed the laws of God, best he could. The fact that he was perfect in his generation just meant that the rest of the generation was so corrupt.
Yes.
He was the shining light that came up out of this whole generation. He was perfect compared to everybody else.
And I just look, I want to say this because I know, and this is, I'm hoping if anybody's listening to this, that because as I've said from the beginning, I don't know if you're listening or watching or whatever, I don't know where you're at in your walk with God and I love that is in here because it gives me the perfect opportunity to say, I don't know where you are in that walk, but if you are on the outside and you see people who are like Chop and I who say, we're walking with God, because I'm telling you, that's my life right now, but I think people see that and they see this it's almost this air of confidence, cockiness, self-righteousness. It often
yep.
and listen, I'm not saying it isn't because what I'm going to talk about is the heart of man, because what God saw in humanity was that the heart of man was still evil. And I'm going to fast forward to the end of this. The heart of man, even when it was still just Noah after all these days, it was still evil.
Yeah.
So the heart of man is, but what can we do when we're born into a heart that is just going to crave that? Now, the problem is we have to remember the story for its whole, because we are always prisoners of the moment. So when I read this, the heart of man is just evil. Well, then it just gives you this helpless feeling. Well, then of course I'm never going to be saved. Why should I even try? Why should I even try? And I think that is a philosophy that leads to, pure evil, because if there's no filter, as I said, it gets to a point where God gets absolutely sick of it.
If you give into that side, there's no telling how deep you can go, down that path.
Yes, and so there's, I understand that when you see that, it makes it seem so bad. But truthfully, remember that there was the entrance of sin.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a corruption that we often don't recognize. So a lot of times, and this is what the enemy does, is the enemy wants to cash in on the fact, it's because when we see that, oh, not today, Satan, right? That sort of philosophy of the devil's going to tell you a lie that you're going to believe. Well, the devil's going to tell you a half-truth that's going to hit you and make you say, yeah, you're right. I am bad. Like really deep down,
yeah,
I'm just a bad person, and I'm never going to be able to change, and I'm never going to be able to do these things. And so,
are you really going to die? You know what I'm saying?
There you go. There you go. Just enough to lead you. And so when you see this, I think, because at the end of this, Noah's still that, but what to me is the beauty, we just kind of forget that. And I want to remind you that it's okay, because even in that, there's still, if there's some righteousness there, it's a good thing. I understand even in our greatest moments, our own righteousness is an extension of our own self-righteousness. Sometimes our good deeds, right?
Yeah.
Are oftentimes like, oh, look what I did. Oh, and then at that moment, it's like you've lost all the purpose of what it was really meant to do. It's not about you.
I've heard it said once that if you receive your reward here, then you have your reward.
You have your So the truth is, when I see this, this is a perfect opportunity, I think, to recognize, because when people see us, because I want to just have because I'm not doing full testimony like to tell you some great thing, but if you see, because I do know this, if you're watching this or listening to this and you did know Chop and I years ago,
yes,
you would know that Chop and I like the hearts of man. There's parts of Chop and I that we would rather, and we're not going to talk about on this podcast. Yeah. But what's interesting is, and what is always been recognizable, is that even as you and I were running with the shovel, as I like to do goofy, because this is the funny thing. People see two burly, angry dudes sometimes, but deep down, when you get in beneath the layers of us, we're just two goofy guys. And so I like the actual song is Running with the Devil.
Right.
But even in our tough moments, there's always been that moment where I think you and I can look at each other and go, okay, this is about the time we need to step out of this and start walking in the right direction.
I definitely think that's moments where, you had that old thing about the footprints in the sand where God's carrying you. I think that's when he picked me up and took me out of that situation. He was like, you've got to get out of this. I got plans for you, Captain. And I hope I'm moving more towards his plan now.
And look, it's funny, and please laugh, but that should be so if you see us now, don't think that we don't have that reflection of understanding the humility of grace.
Yes.
That's the beautiful part of Noah's story, and when you wonder about God's love for you, as I said, I know deep down it's hard sometimes when you feel like you've been a good person. That pride in us goes, oh, I'm not a bad person.
Yeah, there's no way I'm going to go to hell. I'm a good person.
But you know that there's moments when you've not been. You can always find them. And like I said, it's okay, because that's still the grace that's there. And even though Noah started with, saw something in his heart that I want to save,
Right.
but in the end, it's still the heart of man, and there's still something in there with sin that's always going to be a little
And
heading in the
you
wrong
see
direction.
that all
You know,
through the Bible that there are constantly men that God chooses, and at times they fall on their face. It's just inevitable.
it's all of them.
All of
it's
them,
all of
yeah.
them except Daniel.
Yeah, Daniel's the only perfect prophet.
And I got a problem with Daniel, and people know it. We're going to do this show where we just meet three people, and Daniel's quickly moving up there.
Okay.
Because now I just
You got
want to. I
questions.
got questions right now. It's like, you know,
Who was your editor, Daniel?
I mean, there's no flaw in Daniel. What? Okay, we're getting off that track. So, just I know we want to kind of hit on a couple of these things. One is this is the historical document that is the Bible.
Yes.
And I always encourage, if you are sort of on the outside or whatever, and I look to know Chop and I too is to also know, if you look beneath the veil of the resting Bible faces, and maybe you know some of our history. We are also very intuitive, like seekers. Like, you would be surprised to know how much when you and I are interested in something, we dive deep,
Yeah.
a lot deeper than most people do. And not to say that we're trying to find the flaw, but I mean, I'm really like, when I get into anything, I am like, I'm all in. Like, I will dive
I want to
as
feel
deep
confident
as I
when
want
I'm
to get.
talking
Yeah.
about it. I don't want to stumble. I want to feel like I have some facts, especially when it comes to the Bible and the validity of it,
Yeah.
because people will attack it all the time, and a lot of people who are well trained in that will have some very good arguments to throw at you. You need to be able to defend your belief, I think.
I think so too. And Yeah.
That'll bring us to this whole thought about the fact that the ark was just a story that was made up. You've
Yes.
got over 200 different versions of a flood story, which I would definitely say came from this actual event that happened. Why would so many cultures and so many people have the story of a flood unless there was a flood that happened? That was passed down through their
at least
history.
some scientific suggestion too that there was a major flood period
Yes.
of Earth?
There's a lot of
Do
things
the
about
deep dive into all this.
A
Like,
lot of thing about the layers of the earth where they say this took millions of years and this took millions of years
Yes.
and this took millions of years. Why is there no erosion lines in those? If
Right.
something is sitting there for millions of years, there would be some kind of erosion line, but these are perfectly stacked together. And then in the Grand Canyon, they even have signs that will tell you these are the layers of this period, and this period. Some places in the Grand Canyon are missing complete layers of that. And they'll say on the sign, we're not sure why this layer is not here, but this skipped a whole layer of
Right.
of millions of years. They can't explain it.
we can't explain it.
But I do have some facts about the ark itself that I wanted to kind of throw out there.
Yeah, and before we hit, because you and I talked about this too. What's amazing is you can go right now and look. There is on Mount Ararat,
Yep.
which is where, when you do the studies of this, is
Where
where
history says the ark landed.
that's right. The book talks about it and everything, which is modern day Turkey. And there are now pictures that will show you the hull of a boat sitting on the top
Yep.
of this mountain. Those are real. I know people have seen them on whatever social media you've been on.
Yep.
Those are. I have done the extensive deep dive on that.
And go look into
So-
it. I mean, there's physical evidence on Mount Ararat, which is mentioned as the landing place for
Yep.
the ark, of a huge boat-shaped structure on the side of this mountain. They even believe that it actually started further up on the mountain and kind of slid down over time to where it rested at now and then got
Yeah.
covered with dirt or whatever, just from natural things. They're right now not letting anybody excavate there, but they have done sonar, the ground penetrating sonar and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. So it's very compelling. I would love to have some people go up there and start digging in, and
I'm for that.
yeah, I would love to see them open that thing up and see a structure built with
Yes.
stalls and all this kind of thing. I don't know how much of it would still be left intact, but it would just be very interesting to see
haven't-
what come out of there.
And I'm for it, and I know you and I talked about this briefly before we went on before we started the podcast. That there's people that are fighting to want to
Yep.
excavate it, people that don't want it. There's even religious people that don't want it, and there's the people that want to do it because they want the proof, or they don't want them
They
to do
want
it.
the proof for or against.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're either motivated because it's either I want to find the proof, or I want to disprove it, or
Right.
I want it to be proven, or I'm scared it's going to get disproven. So somewhere in between all of that, nobody really has the answers that
Right.
we would really like to see. A side note, just for fun outside of the show, there were some released CIA or FBI documents that also said that we've discovered the Ark, the lost Ark. Have
Oh,
you seen
wow.
this?
I have not seen that.
I got to do it because I haven't done a super dive
Yeah.
into it, but apparently it's not only there, but there's some sort of energy source.
Well, I mean, the Ark has been mentioned over several, decades.
Oh, yeah.
The Nazis apparently had it at one time. It's now maybe in Africa. I don't know. I would love to see it reemerge, and maybe
Yes.
it will. I don't know. I think it would be a great discovery for the Church of Christ, right? For the people, if that thing could be found.
It's like I said, I'm always interested in that stuff. But we're getting
Yeah.
sidetracked. Let's focus on what we're doing now, which is Noah's story,
Yeah.
which is the story of the flood. It's often called Noah's flood. I don't know why they would call it, because Noah
Yeah.
wouldn't have wanted it. Nobody would have wanted it. I know you want to talk about this boat.
I do, because
so-
there's a lot of skeptics, right? That there's no way this boat could have been built. Now we have what looks like evidence on the side of Mount Ararat that says, okay, there was a very large boat that was once
Yeah.
built. A lot of people say there's no way you can get that many animals. There was just too many. We have to remember that the animals, and it says in the scripture that God said the animals will come. It's not like Noah had to go out and catch these things when the boat was ready.
There was a
the
miracle,
animals-
like a parting of the sea.
I actually see
moment.
that as a maybe Garden of Edenish type moment where the animals and man became one again, right? Where there
Yes.
was no contention.
You and I've talked about
Yeah.
that. So again, we've discussed the connection of animals then
Yes.
being different than it is now, and that the similarities that I was trying to use were like the way we are with dogs sometimes
Yeah.
has a little bit more of that community but here you want a real life right now experience. We watch people and we always say, you crazy person, interacting with giant cats,
Oh, yeah.
gorillas, bears. So there's something in between animals and humans that does allow a coexistence of
Yeah.
physical
Yep.
intimacy. So the idea that you're saying no way this happened, you're looking right at the fact that people are hugging bears and lions,
Yeah.
swimming with and again, we can't factor in that God, who empowers a parting of the
Right.
sea, makes a flaming bush talk, that he can't
Right.
command animals. And again,
To be submissive, right?
be
He
submissive
probably told his
and
animals,
behave.
go, behave, and they were probably smaller animals. I
Yes.
mean, you didn't have to get the full-grown elephant on the boat. But let's talk about the boat. So it was built in cubics.
a big boat.
It is a big boat. Cubics about 18 inches, right? I think it was the distance from your elbow to your fingertip or something like that. About 18 inches is what they go off. So on those dimensions, the boat was 450 foot long, 75 foot wide, and 45 foot tall, and had 3 levels in it. Wow. That's 1.4 million cubic feet of space. All right? That's
That's
the
a boat.
equivalent of 200 or 522 standard railroad boxcars. On those boxcars, you can hold about 125,000 sheep. Now, sheep's a mid-range animal,
Mid-range.
and if you had a baby sheep, it would be even smaller, so you could probably put maybe 50% more than that, if you
Sure.
had small animals. Right now, there's less than 18,000 species on the planet.
Yep.
Let's go with a little bit of extinction. We'll double that number to 36.
Okay.
So now you're looking at male, female, 72,000 animals in 1.4 million cubic feet.
And we know there was more humans there because
There was 6 humans.
6 humans.
Well, 8. There was Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their
Were
wives.
there extra ravens and doves? I'd like to assume maybe there was,
Well,
because he
imagine-
did these science experiments that send the birds out, right? There's that
Right,
other
so there
part of the
was
story.
there was birds, but imagine the birds could just come and fly and land anywhere, right?
Right,
They,
right,
as
right.
long as they were around the ark, they had a place to perch.
Sure.
They didn't need their own space, you would think.
Right.
So they had some extra animals for sacrificing and food,
Yes.
but you're talking, I think there was 7 extra sets of certain animals, like clean animals, that they considered clean animals. So it wasn't like there's not an impossibility that this many animals could fit in that sort of space. Now,
Right.
if we can verify that boat on the side, which measures, ironically, the same length and width that we can see from the top as the ark, we have to assume that if it's the same depth, we might have some things that could get some skeptics thinking a different way.
So the math is mathing.
Oh yeah, the math is
the
definitely
math is mathing. If you're doing the math at home,
Yeah,
it means yes, it would have been possible. And again, how did they get them to be along? That's why there were probably levels to probably fight temptations of
Right.
natural order of things. And remember, God was involved. I
yeah.
mean, please.
God sent these animals. I can imagine them just walking up to the boat when it was time and they're getting checked off like okay, here's
Yeah.
your boarding pass kind of thing. They knew they were directed by God that these animals were going to go. And remember, it was each kind. It wasn't a bulldog and a German Shepherd. It was 2 dogs, right? Two
Right.
kind of dogs, and those would eventually morph into
Yeah.
different kind of dogs. But they're all still dogs. Just remember, they're all dogs.
They're all dogs.
There's not-
And they all go to heaven.
yeah. Okay.
No, it's great, and then there's the part where there's something in there, and you may seem like a throwaway comment, and it's actually one of the most amazing things in there. You know, I talked about that is as they get on the boat, then God sealed
Yes.
the boat, and
That's
sealed,
one of my favorite things, is that God closed them up inside this ark, almost like in a protective covering, right? He's like,
Yes.
I'm God, and I'm protecting you from not only the evil, but also from my wrath,
Yes.
which is what he promises for all his believers. I think it's a very good analogy to what we can look forward to in the
Yes.
end times, where we will be protected by God.
Yeah, I mean, and so again, I want to go back to the heart of man here. So the heart of man had gotten so bad that God wanted to flood the earth, or actually, he wanted to end it. And what was interesting here is, again, it doesn't necessarily say it, but I think you got to imply it, that there's never been rain at this point.
Right?
Because-
that's how you would have to understand it.
Because and again, there's a couple things going now, because when you read into it, not only was it the heart of man, but that our sin had corrupted the earth so much that the animals, the birds, everything above the water,
Had to be
because
wiped out.
water is a key thing, and I have not I've been trying to find something to tie it together, and I haven't yet. But I mean, other than then Jesus is the living water. Maybe that's it.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing that I can get to, because when I'm seeing this is that, so at this point we're on this, in my opinion, I guess it's like we're in this vapor barrier from
A
the
dome, yeah.
for a dome. As
Now
we're-
your
it's
flat
a
earthers
mist.
are going to argue that that's still happening.
Whatever. So there's this mist going on, but then God's mad, and again our sin had corrupted the earth so much that it had gotten him to where the animals were almost participating in our, because everything was in chaos and out of order.
everything was, yeah.
So
I even had one person I read, their analogy of it was, imagine when it says, because it says in order that the waters of the deep burst out of the earth, and then the firmament cracked and came down, and they were like, what if this was some kind of volcanic explosions that were coming
yeah, because
up?
no, that's exactly what I
Yeah.
got, because I feel like there was all these sources of water, because it was this vapor that had existed, and then all of a sudden it talks about it. The whale, like the wells of the earth, burst, erupted from the ground.
Yeah.
So there was the water that came from beneath, and there was the heavens split. There was like literally a burst open, and then water started to fall.
His kind of explanation was like, what if that stuff running up out of the ground hit the firmament and cracked it, and that's what caused the waters to like he's explaining this very massive cataclysmic type scene that was happening at the time.
And so again, and I don't understand the dynamic. Well, what was interesting was to think about that again. The animals of the water, I guess, were okay, but he drowned everything, and all flesh was dead.
Yeah,
and so I think though I see a Jesus moment here of the all flesh is dead, submersing in water, and I know we're going to go to the physical baptism, but I'm really talking about the spiritual sense of basically us being pulled out of that pure evil to be absolutely killed and then pulled out of that by grace, because God found something in Noah that wanted him to grant grace to him to pull him out of. And that to me was sort of the Jesus moment of reading this. And again, seeing all this, and because as I said, I was, how does all this water tie together? Because again, he destroyed everything with water. It was coming in directions that people had never seen it before, apparently. And it destroyed everything that was living above the water. But then he brought it, except for this one thing that he found grace in, and then rebirthed it.
That they came out of the water, right?
Right.
But basically, they're in the boat, of course, but they did come out of
out of the water, and then God granted them that covenant that I would never to do that again, but to keep that covenant and he had to change the covenant gets changed a couple times.
It's going to be a recurring theme as we go through Genesis of this covenant, then this covenant.
Right, but there's this, for starters, there's one thing in here that I was telling you about this before. There's this, and I'm gonna have to look it up, but there's a line there where it says so while they're there, you and I were talking about this. It says 150 days in some translations, but you were telling me it was a year.
So the chronological order of the flood from Genesis 7:11 to 8:14 is 1 year and 10 days. If you add up the days, and this starts with the first raindrop until the time he walked off the boat.
Right.
So when it says that the waters were on the face of the earth for 150 days, that's when the water started to recede. So for 150 days after the rain, after the first 40 days, the water stayed consistent from the way I understand it. Because, people are going to be people and try to survive. And at some point, you're just not, you're going to run out of effort, I guess you would say. And apparently that's how long it would take. Oh, that's how long it took anyway. And then the water started to recede, and he started sending out the animals to go see if they came back or not. It would tell them that they found a place to perch. And all that, when you add it up, is a year and 10 days.
Okay. And that's where it brings us to Genesis 8. And so that's where this line comes where it says, so after this time had passed, the next line on Genesis 8:1 is, then God remembered Noah and every living thing and all the animals that were with him in the ark. And God made a wind to pass over it, the earth and the water subsided. This was when this happened. But there's this interesting thing, God remembered Noah, that just sort of hit me. The way that it's translated so many times, it means much more than that. I mean, obviously, it was God honored the commitment that he was going to pull Noah out of this. But I love the way it's written or translated that way, because I was telling you, if God told, I don't know that and for a start, I hate that we vote Bill Cosby into a podcast because he's been canceled, and I think he's in prison actually.
Yeah.
But he did some good comedy, and is it okay to say that? I think it's okay. I mean, opinion-wise, but you've seen the bit where he does about Noah's Ark. Have you ever seen
You
this?
were telling me about it, but I can't
Okay,
recall.
and
If I've
I
seen
meant
it,
to share it with you.
Yeah.
And I think it was him. God, I hope it's him. Otherwise, I'd vote Bill Cosby, and he didn't even deserve it. But I remember him doing this bit, and he goes, and it's kind of funny because he talks about how crazy it must have looked to Noah's neighbors as he's building this ark. And so,
Yeah, 99 years, I think, is how long he.
Right.
And he did that without ever seeing a raindrop.
right,
He's 501 years old when he starts building,
yes, and then
and never saw a raindrop. He's building a boat for.
And so I only brought that up, the comedy bit, because I always found it funny. There's this little bit where he's like, and I need you to build it in the cubits. And he's like, what's a cubit? So there's this, that's my best Bill Cosby. So what I did enjoy about that bit was, look, there's no reference to what culture was like other than we knew it was bad.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, there's no way people that knew Noah, no matter the fact that he was blameless or not, I'm pretty sure that looked crazy to people.
Yeah.
So,
And I'm sure they ridiculed him. I mean, they were just
I
like,
bet
yeah.
you. Like, what are you doing? This great flood's gonna come,
Yep.
and I got to build this thing, and all the animals are gonna come. And it's probably like,
And it speaks to his commitment to his God
Yes.
and to his willingness to put up with the persecution and the ridicule and all that, and stayed faithful.
and so I feel like if you haven't been to one of these, and I even tried to remember if I had, and maybe I have, and I've just doled it down to the point where I can't remember one particular one. But if that doesn't preach to you the whole, man, be faithful. It might look crazy to people, but if you really feel like there's a promise there, and it is,
It is,
and
yeah.
it is in God's purpose, it's going to happen, and you just stay true to that, and God honored that, obviously, by keeping him safe through the. But as I said, it looks crazy to people sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
When you're, and as I said, there's also the story in here of he walked with God, and that may look crazy to people sometimes. So I think there's part of that I do find it had to have been from the outside looking in,
Yeah.
and maybe even to his family. And then I'll fast forward in this part where I brought up God remembered Noah, because I think because it's talking about something way bigger, but there's also the way it's worded there is funny because he's out there floating with all these animals on a boat. The world's been flooded, and there's a part of my human experience that tells me that there's nothing in that where God told Noah, and after all this time, like an exact time.
Right.
And when it comes to God's timing, there's oftentimes in God's promises that says, there's nothing where God says, and I'll do this in 7 years. On September 4th,
Right.
you can expect something awesome. And so having to wait in that is sometimes the hardest part. And I have to imagine, and I know you enjoy a good cruise, but at some point in that day, whatever it was, that it got a little testy. It had to feel like, how much longer are we going to be on this boat? I wouldn't do to have X, Y, and Z. And I know it feels like, well, wow. But let's be real for a minute. You've been around people. I've been around people, and I am people. So people get testy. Even in the most, hey, man, we got food. We're alive. You
Right.
can go through the inventory list of gratitude, and some people are like,
And to your point, there was no specific time limit or a promise of deliverance. It could have been, yeah, I'm going to flood the earth and you're going to float on that boat for the rest of your life.
and they probably thought that. You got to
They
think.
didn't know either way.
Right.
And they were just willing to trust in him and his plan, got on that boat and got sealed in, which is when everything got real for everybody outside. When they were laughing, when that door shut and that first drop hit them in the forehead, they were like, what?
Yeah, I just when you read and again, I'll take it from just real experiences. I've been in like moments where you look around, and it's like you could be on an like an island getaway. I mean, just paradise. People bringing you stuff as soon as you snap your fingers, or I mean, just insert whatever you think is the most awesome thing you could be doing. For me, it's like, man, I have literally been. Like, in awesome places, just enjoying the moment. I'm not trying to
Right.
promote myself, but I'm telling you, I've been in these moments, And I've looked over and someone is just as unhappy
Yes.
and not grateful. And so it's sort of like even though we're delivered from this and we're sitting on this boat and we're alive and the rest of the world is gone,
Yeah.
it's just like I know we're out of Egypt and I know we're no longer slaves.
Let's
and God,
build this calf.
But man, if I have to eat this manna one more time.
Oh my goodness.
But you've been there too, right? Like,
Oh yeah.
People will get testy.
And I mean, I would
whatever
put
reason.
that on myself. That I've been in a situation where I should have been 100% grateful and happy, and just determined to be a grump.
Seek, and you will find. Oftentimes, I've learned
Yeah.
that that's a pretty true statement. But I do want to get to sort of the end of this because I know we're going to run out of time, and I want to make sure we can get all of Noah's flood so that we can just go right into the Tower of Babel and another thing that we can talk about. I think we're going to go back to maybe talking about AI and technology again when we talk about Tower of Babel
Yep.
again. But I do want to wrap up all this stuff with Noah. So
We're going to have to put a little bit more time into the when his sons saw him.
this is where I'm headed right
Okay,
now.
all
Let's
right.
do it right now.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and rip the band.
All right.
I don't know if that's I don't know how to describe this. For starters, unlike I tried to come in hot today a little bit with talking about the heart thing because and I was trying to remember exactly when it is when Jesus when the book says and Adam knew Eve, like that comes in real hot, like right off the top of the page. It's you and I talk when you know what those words mean. And so when I read about whatever, so once they're off the boat, there's this weird thing that happens in a tent. And so when I say I know exactly what it meant when we were talking about certain things.
Yeah.
But here there's a little bit of ambiguity or sort of uncertain. But what I can tell you is whatever it was not good.
Right.
And I have to just say I don't know, but it feels like there was something, for lack of a better term, I think some sort of sinful desire that came from his son and seeing him some way. But again, it reads so difficult. It's like they didn't really want to tell you exactly what happened, but something happened.
Well, we have to kind of look at it to start with, like where was Noah's head? The flood's over. He gets off the boat, and then all of a sudden he's just maybe overcome with emotions, or just gets in his feels, and then he just gets really heavily intoxicated.
Gets really drunk. Yeah.
Yeah, gets really drunk.
Let me not leave that out because I think that
so
plays
for
a
some
huge part
reason,
into
Noah
it.
had overindulged. Like I said, I don't really know what put him in that state, but I
Right.
mean, I'm sure that all of us could probably
Relate?
relate to being in a moment of such high stress and then feeling like, okay, this is finally over and I'm going to let go a little bit, maybe. I don't know. Or maybe he was in rebellion against God at the moment. I don't know.
Who knows?
He did get drunk, though. And in his drunkenness, he got naked. So he's laying in his tent naked. His sons come up, and I want to say doesn't it say that they ridiculed him or laughed at him or mocked him or something like that? And I think that was the sin, was the fact that because the other sons wouldn't look upon his nakedness, and they backed in with a covering so that they wouldn't see his nakedness.
Right.
Now,
But there was something with the other son, though, that, like I said, the way it's worded, it leaves people sort of going, what happened here?
Well, I mean,
Like, what is this about?
well, it got a curse. It cursed his whole lineage, right? It said,
Yeah.
cursed is Canaan for this action. So, and again, like I said, I think this whole section of this is where a lot of things happen to where, because it says something about these offspring will be servants to this offspring, and I'm sure there's a big long rabbit hole we could go down into about how that has translated into modern day contention against some of the people in that land, and maybe people all over the earth.
Yeah. Because, again, there is that, and I'll close this off with this, because I think, again, I always remember that there are people that have a hard time wrapping their mind around a God that apparently loves us, but we live in this horrible world where bad things happen. and you just don't take time to read this book, which is a historical document
Right.
that talks about supernatural events that took place. People are
Yeah.
willing to recognize that the supernatural exists. They will watch ghost stories, horror stories,
Oh, yeah.
UFOs, you name it. But when it comes to this,
And all of those things may be a byproduct of way to desensitize us to actual supernatural events.
But-
So, I mean, I don't know. There's another big,
Yeah, I just
big discussion.
Yeah, I just just looking at all of the ramifications of all the sin, and when you talk about these curses, these things that have happened, they had real consequences.
Yes.
And everything we do, we don't never talk about the butterfly effect that our actions have in people in our lives. But once you realize that, because here's what happens, I think, and again, I'm not being judgmental. I'm just sharing in the human experience, is that we often move in our lives to only because hey, what does it matter? This is my life. I'll do what I want to do. It only affects me. What does it matter to you?
Right.
Everything you do, if something you do affects somebody.
And then
And
that,
something that affects that somebody always affects somebody else.
yeah,
So even if it's one person, it's going to end up affecting everybody before it's all over.
right.
So even though you didn't commit the sin, even though you didn't draw out the curse, even though you didn't put these things or wish these things or even want these things, unfortunately, we find ourselves here because we are guilty by association of being humans.
Yeah. And this
So-
also establishes the line that the Messiah comes from, right? So this would be
Yep.
Shem being the one that is blessed by God. That is going to be the line where Christ eventually comes from. And I'll read it. It says
Go
real
ahead.
quick, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge Japheth, and may he dwell in the tents of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant." So because of Canaan's action, Canaanites, I mean, there was a big, after his Egyptian or the children of God came
Yep.
out of Egypt, they had to rid the land of the Canaanites
That's
so
right.
that they could. And I mean, we'll get to that eventually too.
Eventually, yeah. And again, love this book. There's so many ways to go. Again, Noah's flood is a great thing. And again, remember that the rainbow, which I wanted to hit on that,
yeah,
was something
absolutely.
a
Yeah.
huge sign that God put on earth as a sign.
His promise.
It
Yeah,
was
that
a
he-
promise to man. The rainbow and what its meaning is.
Yeah. And the way that reads in here, it's like it was a reminder to him that when the rainbow shows, it reminds God that I will never do that kind of destruction to the planet again.
Yes.
For that reason.
For that reason.
Yeah. There
Yes.
is going to be a massive destruction.
There is going to be a massive destruction, but he won't do it to destroy humanity
Right,
in that regard. And but I know we got to get out of here, so let's do a prayer here while I get the music going. Thank you, Heavenly Father, for giving us the chance to talk about Noah and his story and about your grace that saved Noah, your grace that saves us now. We thank you so much for that, and we thank you for all things. We know the world needs you, even though sometimes they don't know how to reach you. But we thank you for all things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
And if you want to know how to reach him, just like that.
Yep.
That's how you do it. Next week, though, it's Tower of Babel. Our good friends at the Tower of Babel. Remember the it's terrible. All right, enjoy.
We'll do some babbling.
Enjoy. Until next time, we'll see you here on Jesus, James, and Mark.